Goeiedag, good day, fellow South Africans and citizens of the world. Well, you talk about state capture. I'm going to talk about global capture. What am I talking about? Do you know why you're in a curfew right now and why the lockdown has been strengthened? Nothing to do with the ANC. Nothing apparently to do with George Soros and Open Society Foundation. No. Peering over your shoulder is the New World Order. And their face is the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund. What am I talking about? Well, let me tell you. I'm going to give you my sources too. Zero Hedge. Okay, Zero Hedge, which have a huge international following. Headline: World Bank, IMF exposed. COVID aid conditional on imposing extreme lockdowns and curfews. Now, why are the New World Order doing this? Because they're just testing to see how people will react to being put in a position where they're not comfortable. And that's exactly what's happening right now around the world, but in particular in South Africa. This is from Zero Hedge. Huge foreign loans are given to sovereign nations by the World Bank, IMF and the likes, but the conditions that come attached to these loans are seldom told by governments to their citizens. A recent case in Belarus has exposed the conditions laid by these agencies for loans being provided for COVID-19. The president of Belarus has exposed that the World Bank coronavirus aid comes with a condition for imposing extreme lockdown measures to model their coronavirus response on that of Italy, and even changes in the economic policies which he refused as being unacceptable. Now, think about this. Here you've got a bank demanding that countries like South Africa bring in curfews and extreme lockdown conditions in exchange for billions of US dollars. Now, what do the conditions that I've just suggested do to the economy of a country? They crash the economy. So why would a bank that's loaning billions of dollars to South Africa, for example, be saying to that country, crash your economy? Because you crash the economy, you can't pay your loans. You know what this is about? It's about a one world government, a one world currency. Kill the economies around the world. This is what this is all about. This has been run by the New World Order, the super rich, top tier, and people like Cyril Ramaphosa are going to be having very bruised backsides when this comes into play, believe me, because they're going to be just as big a victims as everybody else. They've been played. Let's continue. Additional conditions which do not apply to the financial part are unacceptable for Belarus. Belarus President Alexander Lukashenko said when speaking about external lending during a meeting to discuss support measures for the real economic sector on the part of the banking system. Alexander Lukashenko asked the participants of the meeting how things were with the provisions of foreign credit assistance to Belarus. The head of state inquired, "What are our partners' requirements?" It was announced that they can provide Belarus with $940 million in so-called rapid financing. Now let's remember that that's exactly the term used with the IMF bank loan to South Africa for their $4+ billion loan. A rapid financing, which kind of suggests fast financing. You know, we'll bail you out of the hole. At the same time, he stressed that additional conditions which do not apply to the financial part are unacceptable for the country. We hear the demands, for example, to model our coronavirus response on that of Italy. I do not want to see the Italian situation to repeat itself in Belarus. We have our own country and our own situation, the president said. According to the president, the World Bank has shown interest in Belarus coronavirus response practices. The president said it is ready to fund us 10 times more than it offered initially as a token of commendation for our efficient fight against the virus. The World Bank has even asked the Healthcare Ministry to share the experience. Meanwhile, the IMF continues to demand from us quarantine measures, isolation, and a curfew. Guess who South Africa has just got that huge $4+ billion loan from? The IMF. And there were conditions included. You're hearing them right now. Belarus is one of the only European countries that has not implemented strict coronavirus containment measures. The no restriction situation is such that even the non-essential services remain open, like they do here in Brisbane, Australia. The Football League of Belarus is still being played. The only restriction kind of step that Belarus took till now is that the school holidays have been extended. Lukashenko is of the opinion that a complete lockdown was completely unnecessary. Similar views have been expressed by many renowned scientists as well. Recently, an Indian doctor has debunked the official narrative on coronavirus. He emphasizes that stress affects health and said that fear isn't necessary because eventually people will develop natural immunity to the virus. He is one of the few people to advocate the opinion that life must continue uninterrupted. Now, it's very interesting because clearly Google are in on the game. There was that Nigerian doctor who was offering other kinds of advice. You don't need a vaccine for the coronavirus and stuff like that. And all her videos have been taken down. Even Donald Trump put it up on Twitter and it was taken down because it was misleading. This is how what you hear is now being controlled by these big platforms run by people like Facebook, Google, which runs YouTube, and Twitter. They're the three big ones. Of course, you've got Instagram and others as well, but the three biggies are clearly controlling the narrative, even with independent and alternative media, just by banning their videos. The president of Belarus is not the first one to expose the pressure exerted by global agencies amidst the coronavirus crisis to further their agenda. Earlier, in a shocking development, the president of Madagascar made a sensational claim that the World Health Organization offered him a $20 million bribe to poison COVID-19 cure called COVID-19 Organics made from Artemisia. Why would they do that? Because they can't patent it, and the people, the drug companies behind it, won't be making a squillion of it. You know, when I was in my early 20s, there was a product called EUSOL. That's EUSOL. And if you had a cut on your hand or something like that, you put EUSOL on your hand where the cut was, and it just fixed it like that. Incredible healing option. But guess what? It was brought out by the Edinburgh University medical side, and there was no patents, and people could just produce EUSOL, and it's been banned because the drug companies can't make out anything out of it. You try and Google Edinburgh University solution or EUSOL. You won't find it. I've tried, I've looked, it's gone, disappeared. I'm talking about back in the 1970s when the doctor gave me EUSOL. Magic stuff. But this is what's happening. The drug companies, which are basically the big players in the New World Order, are now trying to, and don't forget Bill Gates and Melinda Gates are in that team, are trying to control our lives in ways which are just absolutely disgusting. Let's continue. The Tanzanian president kicked out World Health Organization from the country after goat and papaya samples came COVID-19 positive. They came back positive with COVID-19. Can you believe it? And they also had engine oil in there too, which came back COVID-19 positive. This is how ridiculous this whole thing is. Days after the Tanzania move, Burundi also kicked out the World Health Organization coronavirus team from the country for interference in internal matters. It was also revealed in an intercepted human intelligence report that Bill Gates offered $10 million bribe for a forced coronavirus vaccination program in Nigeria. A forced vaccination program. After which an Italian politician demanded the arrest of Bill Gates in the Italian parliament. She also exposed Bill Gates' agenda in India and Africa, along with the plans to chip the human race through the digital identification program called ID 2020. So, let's move to South Africa now, shall we? And this is from Business Tech, and it's headed up the conditions attached to South Africa's 70 billion rand IMF loan. Let's have a look and see what it says. Sorry guys, I'm just moving my camera. The International Monetary Fund, or IMF, has approved a 70 billion rand, or US dollar 4.3 billion loan for South Africa to help the country manage the immediate consequences of the fallout from COVID-19. The Conversation Africa's editor, Carolyn Southey, asked Danny Bradlaugh to shed some light on what South Africans should expect. The IMF has provided the funding through its rapid financing instrument. You're starting to get the gist of what's going on here? Belarus, World Bank, rapid financing. IMF, South Africa, rapid financing. Loans. This is designed to support countries facing an urgent need for financing due to a crisis such as COVID-19 pandemic. The goal is to help the country face the immediate financial consequence of the crisis. As a result, the IMF provides the financing quickly and without strict conditions. The country merely needs to show the IMF that it is facing a crisis, that it will use the funds to deal with the crisis, that it will cooperate with the IMF to solve the balance of payments problems caused by the crisis, and to describe the economic policies that it proposes to follow. In some cases, the IMF may require the country to undertake certain policy actions before it can access the funds. In South Africa's case, the country's payment problems relate to the fact that the economy is expected to contract by about 7% this year and the budget deficit to increase to about 15% of GDP. This means that the government will need to increase the amount it has to borrow. Given that it has been downgraded by credit rating agencies and that the economy is in bad shape, there is a substantial risk that both local and foreign investors will have a limited appetite for South African debt. This will complicate the government's efforts to finance a deficit. The IMF loan helps resolve this problem. South Africa provided the requisite information to the IMF in the form of a letter of intent signed by the Minister of Finance and the Governor of the Reserve Bank. The letter has not yet been made public, but according to the IMF press release, South Africa seems to have informed the IMF that it intends to take certain steps to stabilize the country's finances. This means that the government will cut government spending to reduce its need to borrow. The current disputes over public sector wages and funding for state-owned enterprises are examples of steps it would take. The government has also said it will improve the governance of state-owned enterprises and introduce reforms of stimulating a growing and inclusive economy. These reforms would include measures to improve competition in different sectors of the economy. Now, I'm telling you now, that's a complete and utter red herring. What's actually going on behind the scenes? You saw it in the last couple of weeks where Ramaphosa said, we're now bringing in a curfew. Remember what I was saying about other countries where IMF and World Bank loans, the conditions, hard lockdowns, curfews. This is called controlling the population, getting them used to the fact that they are no longer free citizens. This is what's going on right now before our eyes, and we're sitting there and take it. This is crap. This is crap. But that's the basis on which the IMF are loaning the South African government, the Belarus government, the Italian government, all these other governments, billions of rands, because they just produce out of fresh air. They've just got the authority to produce them. But the people behind those organizations, the New World Order, are sitting in the wings waiting to pounce. Because the economies of every country in the world, if this continues, is going to collapse. And they're going to come out and say, oh, guess what, guys, we got a solution. Yeah. One world government, one world currency, and we'll be running you little serfs. Yeah, talk about slaves and Black Lives Matter. You have no idea what's coming. Anyway, let's continue. South Africa made these undertakings in last October's medium-term budget statement and in the supplementary budget statement in June this year. This suggests that the IMF is merely expecting the country to implement the policies already announced by the government. This kind of financing is provided in one payment. The IMF's press statement doesn't say when the funds will be distributed, but the goal is to make the funds available rapidly. That could be as early as August. Once the funds are dispersed, the government will be free to spend them. Guess where all that money is going to go? Yeah, you got it in one, guys. You're getting the idea. Black privilege class. Yeah, the ANC cadres, the politicians, their mates, they're going to be cleaning up over $4 billion US. They don't care that they're selling the country into a global government. Once the funds are distributed, the government will be free to spend them. According to the National Treasury statement, it plans to use the money to support health and frontline services to protect the vulnerable. Sorry guys, this is a head-banging moment, okay? Because this is such a load of BS. Can't believe the shit that they come out with. Okay. These are all consistent with the purpose of the rapid financing instrument and the government's stated intentions. But these purposes are very general and we will need to see more detail around exactly what the government will spend the funds on. The IMF loan does not impose any conditions over and above what is in South African law on how the funds can be used. Consequently, the funds will be subject to the same procurement and accounting requirements as all other budgetary expenditure, which means they can loot it. And you know why? Because when this South African economy just tanks completely, that's when they walk in and they say, sorry guys, you blew it. We're going to take over now. One world government. In addition, the government will have to account in its future budget statements and reports to Parliament on how the funds have been used. South Africans will also be able to demand that the government demonstrates that the funds have been spent consistently with the requirements of the Constitution and Bill of Rights. This means that the government should show that it is using the maximum available resources from whatever source to help realize all the rights that the Constitution and South Africa's international commitments grant to South Africans. The IMF requires that South Africa repay the funds to the IMF over 20 months, beginning 40 months after the loan is dispersed. This means that South Africans will need to ensure that the funds to repay the IMF are properly budgeted for. Okay, so 60 months is 5 years. So in 2025, when South Africa's economy is completely cactus and it can't pay this loan back and is under special drawing rights or SDRs, that's when the New World Order, one world currency, will start kicking in. Might not happen that year, but that's where it'll be moving, because this fiat money that's created out of nowhere will suddenly be the millstone around everybody's neck in South Africa. and other countries around the world. That's what's going to happen. The most important benefit is that South Africa is getting a 4.2 billion US dollar loan at about 1.1% interest, which will be totally looted once again by the ANC cadres, won't it? This is a very cheap source of funds. If the government tries to raise the same amount either on domestic markets or from other international sources, it would pay a considerably higher interest rate. The current rate for government bonds of comparable maturity is about 7%. This ANC government, they've looted everything, and now pretty well a huge percentage of the taxation received in the country is going straight in to pay off the interest on loans. Just the interest. It's absolutely ridiculous. Given that foreign investors hold about 30% of South Africa's government rand-denominated debt, this boosts the confidence could be important. It will both reduce the incentive for those investors to sell their government bonds, potentially pushing up interest rates, and enable the government to issue new debt if needed. Well, that's a no-brainer. Of course they'll need new debt. The third benefit is that by helping to stabilize South Africa's situation, it will limit the damage that may be inflicted on the neighboring countries. This in turn could help South African exports and thus help preserve jobs and income in South Africa. The most significant downside is that the loan is denominated in foreign exchange. Thus South Africa has to bear the risk that if the rand depreciates, which it will, the loan and the interest on it will become more expensive. Given the state of the South African economy, this is not an insignificant risk. Now, let me just repeat this, guys. You heard me talking about zero hedge with Belarus and other countries where the IMF and the World Bank have loaned money and said you've got to have strong curfews, you've got to have very strong lockdowns, you've got to all these sort of things that all they do is they destroy the ability to build the economy. Let me ask you this one simple question. If you went to your bank, let's say Absa Bank, to buy a house, and they said, yeah, we'll give you a loan of R1 million to go and buy that house, but here are the conditions. You are not allowed to work for the next 2 years. Clearly, that's what the World Bank and the IMF Bank are doing to countries like South Africa. Why are they doing it? Because they want to impoverish them. They want them to be totally hamstrung so that when it comes to repaying the debt, they can't do it. Why are they doing that? 60 months from now is 2025. That's when the New World Order, one world currency, special drawing rights, they will all start coming to the fore. And this is part of the plan, is to actually loan money, which they know cannot be repaid because of the conditions they put in there, i.e. the lockdown, the curfews. You know, they're destroying the global economy because it's part of the plan, so that they can pick up the economy and say to countries, hey, I know you guys are really suffering. You'll find millions of people are dying of starvation. And they'll say, look, don't worry, we have a plan, special drawing rights, one world government, there's a new boss in town, it's a new world order, we'll come and help you out. That's the reason behind what's going on. Because fiat money, remember, which the World Bank and the IMF deal in, is created out of fresh air. It has no real value. It's all bullshit. It's the hugest scam ever in the history of mankind. Anyway, let's continue. But it's important to keep in mind that the IMF denominates the loan and the repayment obligations in special drawing rights. These are the IMF's special form of money, and its value is made up of a composite of a basket of currencies. Now, for those of you who have never heard of special drawing rights, I suggest you just go and Google that. Read it up and you'll see what I'm talking about is correct. This is the new projected currency for the one world government. Anyway, special drawing rights include the US dollar, the euro, the Japanese yen, the Chinese renminbi, and the pound sterling. The values of these currencies tend to fluctuate against each other so that some appreciate while others depreciate. This helps mitigate the foreign exchange risks that South Africa must bear. But because it's special drawing rights, it's the new world order. The second risk is that if South Africa does not use the funds from the IMF wisely, it'll be looted and pillaged, believe me, the country's economic situation will deteriorate and it will struggle to pay back the debt. Now, that's the other thing. Let's cast aside the idea of this really hard lockdown. Consider what happened to the 500 billion rand that South Africa raised to help it get through the COVID-19 lockdown. We know now that a huge amount of it has gone to ANC cadres, mates at a hugely inflated prices just for their own back pockets. You know what I'm talking about? Noses deep in the trough, feeding from the trough. BMWs, Lamborghinis, Porsches, I've got 4 Porsches. I just got them last couple of days because I just made a killing through this 500 billion rand loan. It's a huge scam that's going on, guys. It's a huge scam. Okay, the second risk is that if South Africa does not use the funds from the IMF wisely, as I said, which it won't, the country's economic situation will deteriorate and it will struggle to pay back the debt. If this happens, or the pandemic lasts longer than anticipated, the country could be forced to seek additional support. In either case, South Africa's negotiating position would be significantly weaker. Negotiating position? No negotiating position. Backsides to the wall, guys. This ANC government has totally screwed South Africa. Just think of it. There's US dollar 4 billion loan from the IMF with the conditions of a hard lockdown and the curfew which the government had brought in. 2025, that's the time that one world government will start coming up. It'll start becoming the only solution when millions of South Africans are dying because of poverty. And you have to thank the ANC government for that. Please remember to subscribe to be kept informed. Ring the bell for the updates. Please like this video. Please share this video. And above all, please stay safe.